What's up, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of Purple Bear Biology. Professor Hurley here with another episode about fascinating biology all around us. In this video, we get to discuss our first eukaryotic group of biodiversity, protists. In this episode, we are going to discuss how we group protists together, which due to their diversity is much more challenging than you might think, and we're going to discuss some of the major influences of this biological group from both an ecological and pathogenic side. So let's not waste any time, let's jump right into the coolness. First, let's take a look at our tree of life to see where this group falls. Protists are found on the eukarya branch of life. That's the same branch you're found on. Like other eukaryotes, these organisms have organelles like mitochondria and chloroplasts, and they have a nucleus. Despite these structural similarities, the diversity of protists is complicated. There are numerous groups of these primarily single-celled organisms, and some of the branches of their evolutionary tree have not even been fully explored yet. We are continuously learning more about protists and have reorganized their phylogenetic structure multiple times. In fact, odds are that some protists will even be relocated on their trees during the period of your 4-year college education. To better understand the diversity we're talking about, take a look at the images on this slide. All of these organisms are protists. The variation is awe-inspiring. Some protists form tiny single-celled organisms that are photosynthetic, while other single-celled versions may work collectively together in unison like a multicellular organism. An example of this would be slime molds. So variation is cool and all, but do they serve a vital function in our world? And do they have an impact on us? The answer is yes to both of those questions. And let's take a look at how. First, they form one of the primary foundations of the food web and are one of the primary photosynthesizers on the planet. In fact, approximately 1/4 of the world's photosynthesis is conducted by protists. Energy assimilated by protists is passed up to trophic levels in an ecological system through food webs and consumption. While primarily single-celled, these little critters have a huge influence because they serve as the primary food source for other organisms, which eventually finds its way back to us. But these little ones are not just food. They can also have some huge impacts on the environment. It is no secret that carbon dioxide in the atmosphere can cause global changes. Protists called diatoms can actually assimilate carbon dioxide and secrete it into a calcium carbonate shell that protects themselves. They pull this carbon dioxide out of the water they live in and act as carbon sinks when they die, carrying all of that carbon with them to the ocean floor. Not all protists are good guys, though. Many play a pivotal role in deadly diseases, including malaria, African sleeping sickness, and Chagas disease. Let's start this conversation with malaria. Malaria is a disease that was devastating to new colonizers of the United States. So impactful that in some areas where the disease was prevalent, more than 80% of the individuals in the area would die before they reached the age of 20 years old. This was particularly true in a settlement called Charlestown that would eventually become Charleston, South Carolina. So why this area? Why this town? You can imagine that these initial colonizers were asking themselves the exact same thing. The thing about this area is that it's surrounded by wetlands and water systems, and malaria is transmitted by mosquitoes whose offspring have to develop inside of water. This created the ideal environment for mosquitoes to develop, and the colonists served as the food source the female adult mosquitoes needed to lay eggs. Just like with the tick and the fleas discussed with bacterial pathogens, mosquitoes transferred the malarial parasite protist called Plasmodium by injecting infested saliva into the bite site. Once inside the body, the Plasmodium parasite infects the liver and then travels to the red blood cells where they reproduce inside and wait. When they are ready to be picked up by another mosquito feeding on the infected human, all of the protists rupture out of the red blood cells at the same time and enter the bloodstream. When this mass exodus from the blood cells occurs, there's an immense immune system reaction to the foreign pathogen. This leads to a sudden spike in fever and anemia as the red blood cells die. The spike in fever is periodic and comes and goes based on the rupture of the parasite out of the red blood cells. This periodic fever is referred to as a paroxysm. Different Plasmodium parasites have different patterns of emergence and this leads to different patterns of fever being expressed in the patients. This pattern of fever is so species-specific that the process can be tracked and help identify which species of Plasmodium the patient is infected with. So if we could find malaria pretty much all over the United States at one time, is it found in the United States today? It is incredibly rare, and mostly occurs when individuals travel outside the US and then become infected before returning. If malaria used to be incredibly prevalent in the US, then where did it go? Well, it got eliminated from the US when we devised a plan to release drug-dependent mosquitoes that could not reproduce without the drugs they were raised on in the lab. These mosquitoes could still mate, but they were incapable of producing offspring without drug supplementation. Eventually, this caused the mosquito populations to crash, and with no vector, the disease was eliminated from the US population. Despite being eliminated from the US, malaria continues to be a worldwide problem, accounting for millions of deaths each year. Unfortunately, most of those deaths tend to occur in third world countries with few medical supplies, and in children that struggle to survive the devastating effects of the pathogen. You may be wondering, wait, isn't there a drug that protects us from malaria? Well, yes and no. There are drugs that are designed to help treat and prevent malaria. Chloroquine is one of the primary ones. However, the more we use these drugs, the more the selective pressure we apply for drug resistance. Drug resistance has become an ongoing evolutionary battle when trying to eliminate these protists from the rest of the world. Malaria is not the only disease caused by influential protists. Another protist called trypanosomes can cause 2 additional diseases: African sleeping sickness and Chagas disease. African sleeping sickness is isolated to the central regions of Africa. This isolation is due primarily to the range of the vector, the tsetse fly. Originally, this was a disease of cattle called Ngana. Both African sleeping sickness and Ngana are caused by a tiny single-celled protist called a trypanosome. The parasite gains entry into the host through saliva of the fly parasite. Are you starting to see a trend here? Ticks, mosquitoes, flies, all of them want to feed without detection, so all of them insert saliva to numb the site of the bite, and protists have come along for the ride. In desperation to eliminate the devastating pathogen and the vector, countries have resolved into using massive amounts of insecticides to kill the tsetse fly. Insecticides like DDT have actually been banned in other parts of the world because of their devastating ecological fallout on other organisms. Scientists are not without ideas to fix this problem, though. One amazing idea was introduced with the novel thought about how to attract the vector. Ironically, the flies are not all that bright and are attracted to shadows and smells of their host. One group of scientists proposed creating fake cows sprayed with urine from animals and infused with insecticides. The idea was that these fake cows would attract the flies, and then they would die after coming in contact with the insecticide. What do you think? Did it work? Heck yeah, it did! After setting up 60,000 of these fake moo-moos, the rate of Ngana dropped significantly from 10,000 to only 50 cases each year. Yay for science! So if you're from the US, or currently live here, you may be feeling pretty safe at this point. No malaria, or African sleeping sickness. So where's our deadly protist, you ask? Have no fear, your fresh nightmare is here. Let's finish this episode with Chagas disease. Chagas disease is caused by another trypanosome protist. While the acute symptoms of Chagas disease may have you feeling like you got the flu, one definitive sign is something called Romanna's sign, where there's inflammation around a single eye. The chronic stage of the disease can be devastating, influencing how your heart is pumping blood around your body, eventually leading to congestive heart failure. What makes this all more scary is it can take as much as 10 years after contracting the protist for the more devastating symptoms to develop. Crazy fact, this trypanosome does not get injected through saliva. Instead, the kissing bug feeds around your eyes and lips while you sleep. While it's feeding, it actually poops on you. The poop of the insect is infected with the protist, and when we scratch our skin, we introduce tiny tears in the surface that allow the parasite to enter our bloodstream. So where can we find this parasite and vector? Though it's thought to have originated in South America, the insect has now found its way all around the globe. So what about Arkansas? Oh yeah, It's here, and in most of the other southern states as well. Regardless of the disease they cause, trypanosomes are incredibly difficult to treat because they're constantly evolving. They evolve new surface proteins. These surface proteins act kind of like flags that our immune system can recognize and mark for attack. But every time the immune system gets it worked out, the trypanosomes change what these proteins look like by shedding the surface that contains them. These surface proteins are highly variable, and the diversity for them is astounding. The evolutionary arms race that these parasites set up make it very difficult for our bodies to mount an attack, and thus make it really hard for us to treat them. Well, that's it for this episode of Purple Bear Biology. If you found the video useful or interesting, be sure to click the like button and share it with your friends. As always, thanks for watching, and see y'all next time.